Szanowni Państwo, na obchodach dziesięciolecia fundacji Auschwitz-Birkenau pragnę powitać byłych więźniów obozu Auschwitz oraz ocalałych z zagłady. Witam serdecznie
I'd like to bid warm welcome to the honorable survivors and Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany. I'd like to bid warm welcome to the Prime Minister of the Republic of Poland, Mateusz Morawiecki. I'd also like to bid warm welcome to all the services of diplomatic corps, as well as the Management Board of Auschwitz-Birkenau Foundation. I'd like to bid warm welcome to all the authorities sitting on the foundation and also the donors of the foundation. I would also like to bid warm welcome to the representative of the churches, Jewish congresses and Jewish municipalities, as well as the representatives of the Roma and Sinti people. I would like to bid warm welcome to the representatives of local authorities and self-governments. Ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome the representatives of all the institutions and organizations. I'd like to bid warm welcome to all the guests who've arrived to join us for this important moment. May I now give the floor to the former inmate of Auschwitz-Birkenau, Mr. Bogdan Bartnikowski.
Drogie dziewczyny
Dear girls from the children's block in Birkenau,
szanowna pani premier, szanowna pani kanclerz,
dear Madam Chancellor,
panie premierze,
dear Prime Minister,
drodzy państwo,
ladies and gentlemen,
13
on the 30th of August
1944 roku
1944,
sauny szła
there
wieczorem
was
wielka
a great
gromada
team of
kobiet i
people,
dzieci
children and women marching to the zona. They were just brought from Warsaw, from the Warsaw Uprising, and the first words that I heard back then,
szczególnie skierowane do nas
addressed to us, to the children, to the kids,
w języku niemieckim,
were the words in German:
kleine polnische Banditen aus
Kleine
Warschau.
polnische Banditen aus Warschau. Little Polish bandits from Warsaw.
Wśród tych kobiet
Well, among these women and children, there was myself. I was 12 years old at that time.
Odejść na rampie.
Well, basically, I should have perished there on the ramp, or I should have been transported to the male camp, but I wanted to stick as close as possible with my mother. And that is why I managed to join the younger kids and women who were there, who were gathered there in the evening on the 30th of August,
skierowane do łaźni.
and then they were transported into the sauna, into the baths.
Mieszkańcy powstańczej Warszawy
So we were there with Warsaw uprisers, and
bez możliwości umycia się,
we were in transport for a couple of days already. We couldn't wash, we couldn't take shower.
byliśmy w piwnicach,
We were down there in the
broniąc się
cellars,
przed
trying to
nalotami
protect ourselves against bombings
i pociskami artyleryjskimi.
and against the artillery.
I tutaj nagle,
And all of a sudden, here we are.
kiedy weszliśmy do
When we entered
pomieszczeń łaźni,
the baths,
kazano
the
się nam
sauna,
rozebrać.
they asked us to strip our clothes.
To był dla mnie
Well,
niesamowity szok.
it came as a great shock for myself.
12-letni
I
chłopak
was 12 years old at
Muszę
that
się
time,
rozebrać
and all of a
wobec
sudden I have to strip
kobiet.
down
i tam i obok
in
mnie
front
jest
of
moja
all the
matka.
women, including my mother.
Ja nie wiedziałem, co mam
I
zrobić
didn't
z
know what to
oczami,
do,
żeby
where
nie
to look.
widzieć
I didn't want to look at these women
nagich
naked.
kobiet wokół mnie.
I didn't want to look around at all
Jak
these
mówię,
naked
nie mieliśmy
women.
kontaktu z wodą,
As I said,
zmyciem się
we
przez kilkanaście
did not
dni.
wash for a number of
Pomieszczenie,
days.
w
So
którym się
the room
rozbieraliśmy,
in which
było
we were stripping down
wypełnione potem
was sweaty
z dawno niemytych ciał.
because our bodies have not been washed for so long. We were cramped,
Było nas
was
przecież
so
bardzo
much
dużo.
crowded because there were so many of us
I
there.
Co chwila ktoś mnie
And every now
dotyka,
and
ja
then
nie mogę
somebody
się
would have
odsunąć
touched me,
nigdzie na
right?
bok.
And I
Widzę
cannot
wokół
move
siebie
around. What I
nagie
can see
kobiety,
around me is those naked women,
nagie piersi,
naked breasts,
pośladki,
buttocks.
I nie mogę się odsunąć.
But I
Nigdzie
can't
na
move
bok, bo nie
away.
ma
There is no way
miejsca.
I can move aside because there is no room.
Krok za krokiem
So we
przesuwamy
walk
się
step
w
by
jakieś
step,
nie wiemy
moving
gdzie,
somewhere, we
wreszcie
don't know
widać
where, and finally I can see
więźniarek, które
this
strzygą
group
kobiety.
of other
Oczywiście
female
przychodzi moja
inmates
kolej,
who are
także
shaving
zostaję
our heads.
ostrzyżony.
So here comes my
Trzymam to
turn.
moją
I'm holding
rękami, to
my
moją dziecięcą
heads
jeszcze
on those
męskość, bo przecież
childlike
jestem
penis. I'm just a boy. My masculinity has not flourished yet. This female worker is taking a shaver, but she takes my head down and she slaps me on my butt, and she rushed me
To było pseudomycie,
from the
dlatego, że
room.
było
It was not really
nas
shower, it was not really
bardzo
washing,
dużo.
because there were so many of us
Nie było
back
mydła,
there. There was no
nie było
soap,
ciepłej wody,
there was no
nie było
hot
możliwości
water, it was not possible
wytarcia się,
to use
tylko
towels,
przepędzano
so we were
nas
rushed
do następnej
into another
sali. Już była
room.
noc, ciemno.
It was
i
already dark,
nago
the
w tej
night has
sali
come, so there we
siedzieliśmy
were,
całą
naked,
noc. I znowu
gathering for the entire night.
jednocześnie chcę być cały czas bliżutko
So I
razem
want
z
to be
moją
close to
matką.
my mother. I can remember this
A jednocześnie
feeling,
bym bardzo
wanting
chciał, żeby mnie nikt
to be
nie-
close to
nie
my mother, but at the
dotykał.
same time I just don't want to be
Nawet ona.
touched, not even by hair.
Następnego dnia
And the next day,
zostaliśmy przepędzeni do
we were rushed to the
do obozu kobiecego.
female camp,
bloku
to women's
dziecięcego,
camp, the
gdzie
children's
było
block,
nas, dzieci do lat 14,
with other children up to
Około
14 years
350.
of age. About
To było
350
moje
kids like
pierwsze
that
wrażenie
were there. This was my
z
first
tym
impression
budynkiem,
of this building,
saun.
of this zona or baths.
I miałem jeszcze drugie
But then
wspomnienie
I have another memory
z tego
flashing in
budynku.
related to this
Kiedy w
building.
styczniu 45
In January
roku
1945,
mój numer został
when my
wyczytany
number was read
przez
out
pisarza
by the camp's writer
razem z
in the
kilkoma
block and together
chłopakami
with some
w
other
moim wieku,
boys of the same age,
skierowany właśnie tutaj.
I was
Nie wiedzieliśmy, gdzie idziemy,
brought here.
po
We
co,
never knew
bo
where
przecież
we're going
nikt
and
nam
what
tutaj
for.
nic nie tłumaczył.
Nobody was explaining things
byliśmy
back
po
then,
prostu
right?
więźniami,
We were just
pod ludźmi.
inmates. We were under
Ale
people.
okazało się, że tutaj
And then it
w tym
transpired
budynku czeka na nas
that in this building
gromada
there was a
naszych
group
rówieśników
of our
z obozu
peers
kobiecego,
from the female camps,
rówieśników,
aged
to
at
znaczy
the
dzieci
same,
od zupełnie malutkich
that is small
do
children up
takich
to
14, jak ja,
14
i
years
nieco
old
starszych,
and a bit older, so
14-letnich.
12, 13, 14 years old.
z tą
So we were
gromadą
awaited
dzieci
by this group
są
of
także
other
matki.
children and their mothers.
I wśród nich jest moja matka.
And there was my mother
Znowu parodia mycia.
among them. And again,
ubieranie się
some
w
kind of
nieco
ad hoc washing. We could
łachy.
put on some better rags, if I may say so. And again, we were rushed
W kierunku stacji kolejowej.
towards the railway station.
Ale teraz po tej łaźnie szedłem,
So I was walking through the baths,
trzymając się za rękę razem z matką.
holding my mother's hand.
I to był wielki dzień.
And this was
dlatego,
such a
że
great day
od
for me,
początku, jak tutaj
because
w
since the
sierpniu
very beginning,
44
since August
przyjechaliśmy
1944, when
i
I first
pytaliśmy,
arrived, we
kiedy
were all
będziemy
asking, when is it
wolni?
that we can be free? When will we
Starzy
be free?
więźniowie,
And the
kapo,
older inmates and the
tylko się
capos
śmieli,
would laugh at
wolność
us
byście chcieli.
and would say, well, you
Widzicie
want to
tego
be
nie?
free? Can't you see these
Stąd
chimneys?
na wolność wychodzi
This
się
is how
tylko
you get
przez
out.
kominy.
You can only get out through those stacks and chimneys. There is no other way out.
I nagle okazało się,
And then
że ta droga jest.
it turned out that there was a way out,
razem z
that
matką,
I
nie na
can walk
wolność.
together with my
Jesteśmy w
mother.
dalszym
Well,
ciągu
we were not yet free, right?
więźniami.
We were still
Idziemy
inmates,
po prostu do
but
innego obozu.
we walking to
Ale
another
wychodzimy
camp,
stąd
but we're getting out of here.
z Birkenau.
We're getting out of Birkenau.
Jak nam mówiono, się nie wychodzi, ale my wierzyliśmy, że wyjdziemy.
Nobody told us that we would get out of Birkenau, but we believed we would. And so,
W tej sali to jest, można
in this very
powiedzieć,
room,
jakby przedsionek
this is like
dla
an
nas przynajmniej, to był
antechamber
przedsionek piekła,
of hell,
które miało
a waiting room
zacząć
for
się
hell.
już następnego dnia
that was about to
obozie
start
kobiecym,
in the
w
females'
obozie
camp
mężczyzn.
next day and then in the males' camp. Thank you very much.
Szanowni Państwo, o odczytanie listu od
Ladies and
prezydenta
gentlemen,
Rzeczypospolitej
may I now
Polskiej
ask
Andrzeja Dudy, proszę pana ministra Wojciecha
Wojciech Kolarski to read out the letter addressed by Andrzej Duda, the President of the Republic of Poland.
Przypadł mi zaszczyt odczytania listu, który
It is my honor to read out the letter that has been addressed by the President of the Republic of Poland, Andrzej Duda, to everyone present here today in Auschwitz-Birkenau.
Szanowny Panie Premierze,
Venerable survivors, Prime Minister, Excellency Chancellor, all honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen.
przysyłam serdeczne
I
pozdrowienia
am
wszystkim
sending
Państwu,
heartfelt
którzy byli na
greetings to all of you who are attending the ceremonies marking the 10th anniversary of the Auschwitz-Birkenau Foundation.
i władzom
I
oraz
congratulate and express my appreciation to its management as well as to all people and institutions who participate in and support the foundation. Thank you for fulfilling your mission to preserve for future generations this shocking place of execution and remembrance of over 1 million victims of the German Nazi concentration and extermination camp in Auschwitz.
niedawne obchody
The recent celebrations of the 80th anniversary of the outbreak of the Second World War reminded all humanity of the destruction of independent Poland by the Nazi Third Reich.
przez siebie ziemię
The Germans brought death factories to the occupied lands and built an unknown before extermination machine.
zorganizowanego ludobójstwa
Auschwitz-Birkenau
Auschwitz-Birkenau.
is the symbol of this organized genocide.
Mordowano Żydów.
Jews were murdered here, as well as Poles, Roma and Sinti, Soviet POWs.
Ta ziemia,
This land, these walls are permeated with fear, shouting, tears and blood of mass murdered people.
miejsce to już na zawsze
This place will forever be a warning to all generations of the crimes that a person possessed of hatred and contempt for other nationalities is capable of.
my Polacy
We,
i nasza
Poles and
Rzeczpospolita
our
wypełniamy
republic
powinność
are fulfilling the obligation to protect the memory and truth about what happened here.
podejmujemy
We're
zobowiązanie
making a commitment to carry to the world the message that comes from here, from the former Auschwitz-Birkenau camp. That is why we keep calling out, never again. Nothing like this can ever happen again. This must never happen again.
Dla pamięci o
The
Holokauście
preservation of this place is of fundamental importance for the memory of the
właśnie
Holocaust.
materialne ślady,
It
wymownie
is precisely the material traces that testify meaningfully to the crimes committed here. That is why caring for this area of the former camp is a part of our, Poles, and the Polish state's mission to nurture and disseminate the truth about the Holocaust.
liczymy na wsparcie
In this great work, we count on the support of all people of goodwill who are close to peace and security in the world.
niebawem.
Soon, on the 27th of January, on the 75th anniversary of the liberation of the Auschwitz-Birkenau camp,
Spotkają się
the survivors and representatives of state authorities from many countries are going to meet here. Together, we will testify to our determination to defend the memory and the truth about the Holocaust. In this way, we will express our common responsibility for the future. I am convinced that we will also demonstrate our will to pass on the message and warnings flowing from Auschwitz-Birkenau to the future generations.
z wyrazami szacunku prezydent Rzeczypospolitej
Signed by the President of the Republic of Poland.
Szanowni Państwo,
Ladies and gentlemen, may I now ask the Prime Minister of the Republic of Poland, Mateusz Morawiecki, to take the floor.
Czcigodni ocalani,
Honorable survivors, Chancellor,
wszyscy
Director, ladies and gentlemen gathered here today.
Druty, mury, domy,
Barbed wire,
chodniki
buildings, pavements, barracks
świadkami tamtych
testify
zbrodni.
to the events of the past, to what happened during the Second World War, what happened to inmates, Jews, Poles, Soviet POWs,
Roma,
Roma and Sinti at that time.
Dzisiaj odchodzą ludzie, którzy są
Today
świadkami tamtych.
we have fewer and fewer witnesses of those terrible times.
Świadectwo przedstawione
We have listened to
w poruszający sposób.
the moving testimony
Pana, który był
delivered by
jako chłopiec
Mr. Bartnikowski, who was, as a small boy,
tym bardziej jest
inmate of Auschwitz-Birkenau camp.
tę pamięć pielęgnować,
It is our duty
bo
to make
jeżeli
this
pamięć
memory
to
alive.
jakbyśmy drugi raz
If we lose memory, it is
ludzi, którzy
as
przeszli
if
przez piekło, przeszli przez niebo.
second time that people who have experienced terrible moments here, as if they were hurt again.
Brak pamięci,
Emmanuel Levinas said that lack of memory, no memory, forgetting would mean that evil triumphs again.
dbać,
For this reason, we have to do our best
byśmy dbali o tamtych ludzi.
remember those events. This is what we can do for those people.
Staramy się w związku z tym dbać o
We are
wszystkie
therefore doing
miejsca.
our best to take good care of such places as this one, places very special to our memory. I was deeply moved a few days ago by the history of a place not very well known
Na północy województwa
in the center of Poland, in the Świętokrzyskie region near the town of Skarżysko-Kamienne. There is a place
przemysłu obronnego Mesko.
called Merkel,
W II wojny światowej
a factory,
ta fabryka była
arms factory. During the Second World War, it was a labor camp.
obozem pracy
This was a very special labor camp
w strasznych warunkach
because in terrible conditions,
z głodu,
many people perished there because of starvation, because of hard labor,
pracy.
because of illnesses. As many as 35 people perished there.
Wie, kto
Who
takich
knows
miejsc,
about this place?
takich miejsc
And this is not the only place. There have been many other places in the territory occupied by Nazi Germany.
pewnie nawet
There are dozens, perhaps hundreds such places.
o Treblince.
Today I spoke to the Chancellor about Treblinka. When we were traveling here to Birkenau, I spoke about Treblinka, a place where about 800,000 people perished in terrible conditions, murdered.
Symbol
This is yet another symbol of those times.
Zofia Kosak-Sztucka mówiła, że ten,
Zofia
kto jest
Kosak-Szczucka used to write
jest jak gdyby
that he who is passive to evil is as if evil's accomplice.
że ten, kto jest
We can say today that those who are passive
jest jakby
to lies in the history as if is the co-author of historical distortions.
prawdę tamtych czasów.
That is why together we have to act so that the memory of the past is not lost.
Austrii
That is why of the reasons why we have come up with an initiative, the
Guzen, gdzie zginęło
Mauthausen-Gusen camp
co drugie
in
zginęło
what is Austria today.
polskiej
It's
inteligencji.
a place of a former concentration camp. Every second inmate died there. Some citizens of Poland, member of intelligentsia.
Koncentracyjnych i obozach zagłady,
We do not want this land to be neglected land.
jakieś miejsca
We do not want
pamiętnienia,
those places to be left without proper memory, without proper commemoration.
świadectwa z tamtych czasów
Testimonies from the past
teraźniejszość.
build
Jednym z takich
our present.
chłopca żydowskiego, który
One of such testimonies comes from a small Jewish boy who survived the Holocaust. He said,
jeszcze są
I didn't think there were any cities left after the terrible destruction of my town.
żyłem wśród
He
lat,
said, I lived in forests, I just saw fields around. I thought there were not many people left.
pokazuje
A very moving memory that shows the trauma of those times, the trauma of those who survived, as it has been presented today by Mr. Bartnikowski.
drodzy ocalali z tamtych czasów.
Survivors,
Wszyscy szanowni goście.
dear guests,
Państwo polskie zobowiązuje
the
się
Polish
do dbania o
state
pamięć o tamtych
declares
czasach,
that it's going to continue
o zbrodniach
caring for the memory of the past,
i chcę
what happened,
że
the terrible deeds perpetrated by Nazi Germany. Let me say again,
wymaga tej pamięci,
justice requires
jednocześnie
this memory.
zadośćuczynienie wobec żyjących.
At the same time, let us remember about the need for compensation for those who are alive, but also compensation for the victims. This is part of what is so important. This is the justice that we're going to take care of. Thank you very much.
Szanowni Państwo, o zabranie głosu proszę kanclerz Republiki
And
Federalnej.
now, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to give the floor to the Chancellor of the Republic of Germany, Angela Merkel.
Sehr geehrter Herr Ministerpräsident, sehr geehrter
Minister, Prime Minister, Director, Excellencies, but first and foremost allow me to address myself, especially to those of you who are historical witnesses. Ladies and gentlemen,
deutsche Bundeskanzlerin zu Ihnen zu
for me, it is anything but easy to stand here before you and to speak to you. I am filled with deep shame in the face of the barbaric crimes that were committed here by Germans, crimes that are unfathomable, that defy our imagination, that are inconceivable, filled with horror and shock when confronted with the crimes and horrors inflicted upon women, men and children in this very place. One has to fall silent, for there are no words to express the sorrow and our mourning for the suffering and the murder of people here, for all the many people who were humiliated, tortured and murdered here. And yet, however difficult it may appear in this place that stands like no other for the most atrocious crime against humanity, to fall silent must not be our only response. This sight places us under the obligation to keep the memories alive. We have to remember the crimes committed here and to name them. Auschwitz, this name stands like no other for the murder of millions of Jews in Europe, for the betrayal of all civilized values that was the Shoah. Auschwitz also stands for the genocide of Sinti and Roma in Europe, for the suffering and the murder of political prisoners and representatives of the Polish intelligentsia, of resistance fighters, prisoners of wars from the former Soviet Union and other countries, homosexuals, disabled people, and numerous other people from all over Europe. The suffering inflicted upon the people in Auschwitz. They died in the gas chambers, they suffered hunger and froze in the cold, they suffered epidemics, were subjected to torturous pseudo-medical experiments, they were forced to work until totally exhausted. The horrors that happened here are unfathomable, they cannot be grasped. In the camp complex of Auschwitz alone, a minimum of 1.1 million people, the majority of whom were Jews, were systematically murdered in cold blood. Each and every one had a name. His and her dignity was inviolable. They have a family and a history. Their deportation already, they were crammed into cattle wagons. The procedure they underwent upon arrival, the so-called selection at the ramp, they all aimed to dehumanize these human beings, to strip them of their dignity and individuality. Officially, this place, as part of UNESCO World Cultural Heritage, is called today Auschwitz-Birkenau, German Nazi concentration and extermination camp, 1940 to 1945. This full name is important. Auschwitz is on Polish territory, but in October 1939, Auschwitz was annexed as part of the German Reich. It was a German extermination camp operated by Germans, and I place value on stressing this fact. It is important that we clearly identify the perpetrators. We Germans owe this to the victims, and we owe it to ourselves. To keep alive the memory of the crimes committed, to identify the perpetrators, and to commemorate the victims in a dignified manner, that is our enduring responsibility. It is not open to negotiation, and it is an integral part and will forever be an integral part of our country. Acknowledging that responsibility is an integral part of our national identity, our self-perception as an enlightened and liberal society, as a democracy where rule of law reigns. Once again, Jewish life is flourishing in Germany. We are linked to Israel through manifold and friendly ties. That is anything but to be taken for granted. It is a great gift, akin to a miracle. But it cannot undo the horrors that happened. It cannot bring back to life the Jews that were murdered. There will forever be an empty space in our society. 70 years ago, the basic law, Germany's constitution, came into force. It was influenced by the lessons from the horrors of our past. However, we are also aware of the fact that man's inviolable dignity, freedom, democracy and rule of law, however precious these values may be, are very vulnerable and fragile indeed. This is why we have to time and again strengthen these fundamental values, improve them, protect them and defend them in our everyday life, in our everyday interaction, but also in the actions of a government and in political discourse. These days, this is more than just rhetoric. These days, it is important that we state this in an unequivocal manner, because what we're experiencing of late is an alarming level of racism, increasing intolerance, a wave of hate crimes. We're witnessing and experiencing an attack on the fundamental values of liberal democracy and a very dangerous historical revisionism that serves a hostility that is directed against specific groups. We're focusing our attention especially on anti-Semitism, which poses a threat to Jewish life in Germany, in Europe and beyond. The more clear and unequivocal do we have to state that we will not tolerate any form of anti-Semitism. Everyone ought to feel safe and at home in Germany and in Europe. Auschwitz, more than any other site, reminds us and urges us and places us under the obligation, each and every one of us, to be vigilant, to preserve humanity and to protect our neighbor's dignity. Because it is, as Primo Levi once said, who was born 100 years ago in Turin, who survived Auschwitz as a forced laborer and later, as I said, wrote, "It happened, therefore it can happen again." End of quote. And that is why we must not close our eyes and ears when people are being verbally abused, humiliated or isolated. We have to stand up and take issue with and openly disagree with those who incite other people to hatred and promote prejudices against people of a different faith or a different origin. And part and parcel of the responsibility that we bear is remembrance. We must never forget. We cannot draw a line, nor can we allow a trivialization of the Holocaust. Or to put it in the words of the Auschwitz survivor and former president of the International Auschwitz Committee, Noach Flug, and I quote, "Memory is like water. It is vitally important, and it finds a path of its own, seeking new spaces, making its way towards other people. It does not have an expiry date, and it is and cannot be officially declared as dealt with or completed." End of quote. That this memory that is vitally important seeks and finds a path of its own, as Noach Flug put it, is something that we owe in a special way to many of the contemporary witnesses, the survivors. Thus, I am immensely pleased to be able to welcome some of them amongst us today. It was you who over the past years have time and again spoken to us and shared your experiences with us. Who can imagine the strength it takes to once again and time and again recall these painful experiences, or even to return to this very place? You are sharing the knowledge about your life stories with younger people for them to learn. You summon the courage and the strength for reconciliation. That is genuine human greatness. I'm immensely grateful that we may learn from you and may listen to you. Very soon, the liberation of Auschwitz will have taken place 75 years ago. Few and fewer people can tell us about their experiences from that period in time. And that was the reason why the writer Navid Kermani once aptly said, and I quote, "For any memory to be etched into our hearts, to which the memorials, stumbling blocks and rituals of remembrance may refer, it will be even more important for future generations to go and see those places with their own eyes where Germany crushed man's dignity, to travel to those countries that Germany drowned in blood." End of quote. In many places, the perpetrators have tried to cover up their tracks, such as extermination camps such as Belzec, Sobibor, Treblinka, Mali Trostenetz, Babinja, and thousands of other places in Europe where Jews, Sinti and Roma, and many other people, even whole village communities, were murdered. However, here in Auschwitz, the SS and their henchmen were not successful in covering up their tracks. This memorial bears testimony, and we must preserve that testimony. Those who visit Auschwitz and see the watchtowers and the barbed wire, the barracks and prison cells, the remains of the gas chambers and crematoria will be haunted by the memory. As Kermani put it, it will forever be etched into their hearts. 10 years ago, the former Polish Foreign Minister Władysław Bartoszewski, who himself was imprisoned in Auschwitz, initiated the foundation of the Auschwitz-Birkenau Foundation. Dear Mr. Siwiński, I would like to thank you and all those who have worked in this foundation and have dedicated themselves to preserving this memorial and this center for documentation. And I thank all those who have participated in the project of restoration and conservation. You have shown great engagement, and you're working hard to make sure that this place continues to bear witness. Brick barracks were repaired and reinforced so as to preserve them for the future. Excavation work was carried out. Support walls have been erected. Tents were set up, clothes and possessions, the few belongings of the victims were restored and preserved. The conservation work and the future plans, of course, require much more foundation capital for the next 25 years, and Germany will make a substantial contribution. We took a decision yesterday together with the minister presidents of the various federal länder of Germany. Thanks to the efforts of the foundation and the many international tour guides, this memorial has become a place of learning and educating people, a place of reflection and acknowledgement, a site, a place that sends out the message, never again. I'm immensely grateful for that. But nothing we do can bring back the people who were murdered here. Nothing can undo these unprecedented crimes. These crimes are and continue to be part of Germany's history. And this is a story, a history that has to be told time and again, so as to ensure that we remain vigilant, to intervene at a very early stage, to ensure that these crimes are not repeated, to ensure that we fight racism and anti-Semitism, stand up to it with dedication and determination, anti-Semitism in all its despicable forms. This history, this has to be shared, this story has to be told so as to honor the memory of the dignity of each and every individual and honor the memory of the victims. We remember and commemorate the people who came from various countries of Europe to Auschwitz and were deported there. We remember and commemorate in this very place the many Polish victims. Majority of them were political prisoners for whom that camp, the prison camp, the concentration camp had first been set up. We remember and commemorate the 6 million murdered Jews and the roughly 1 million Jews that were murdered in Auschwitz-Birkenau. We remember and commemorate commemorate the Sinti and Roma who were deported, tortured and murdered. We remember and commemorate the victims of mass executions by firing squad. We remember and commemorate those who were deported to ghettos, those who were hiding in fear for their lives, those who had to flee their homes. We remember and commemorate all of those who lost everything, their families and their friends, their home, country and their family home, their hopes and their plans, their trust and their joy at being alive, and their dignity. We remember and commemorate those who were kept wandering around for years, even after the war had ended, and those who had to wait for a long time in camps for displaced persons. Those who survived had been severely marked by the horrors that they had experienced. In her memoirs, Margot Friedländer wrote, and I quote, "They first had to learn once again that they were human beings that bore a name." Many of them asked themselves the question, why me? Why did I survive and not my little sister? Why not my best friend? Why not my very own mother or husband? Many of them for a very long time, if at all, were able to find out how and where their close relatives had been murdered. These wounds will never heal. The more grateful I am to everyone who has summoned the courage and strength to speak about their recollections and experiences, to share the pain and the recollections, in order to contribute to reconciliation. I bow my head before these people. I bow my head before the victims of the Shoah. I bow my head before their families. I thank you very much for allowing me to be with you today.
Szanowni Państwo, głos oddaję
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Piotr Cywiński, who is the manager of the Auschwitz-Birkenau Museum and the guardian of the memorial. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my dear guests,
W przekazie nowym pokoleniom
as we try to reach out to the new generations
bardzo trudnej pamięci
and try to pass on this very difficult memory,
dwa autentyzmy.
what meets in Auschwitz is two types of authenticity.
Niesamowity
There is this
autentyzm,
amazing authenticity and genuity of words,
tak jak dzisiaj słyszeliśmy z ust.
as we heard them spoken from Bogdan Bartnikowski.
Jest ten autentyzm
But there is this authenticity of a memorial.
I te dwa autentyzmy
And these two
niezwykle
authenticities
nawzajem.
need one another in an extraordinary manner.
Przeczytał książkę,
If you read the book,
wspomnienia,
the memoirs, the testimonies of a victim of this camp, and then if you come and see this place,
zrozumie więcej.
then you get to understand
Ktoś
more.
zobaczył to miejsce,
If you saw this place and then read the book,
ten ktoś przeczyta więcej.
then you would read more out of the same book.
To przekonanie reguł
And
postaci
this
lat temu,
was really the leitmotiv that I had this 10 years ago,
że musimy znaleźć jakieś rozwiązanie,
when we decided that we need to find a solution to preserve as much as possible from things that were not here to last. They were not built with an intention to last.
wiemy jak głęboko ma to
Today, we realize how important it is for the post-war Europe and for the post-war
nie zmniejszy
war.
się za jedno czy dwa pokolenia.
And this significance will not pass or diminish after 2 or 3 generations have passed. This was the experience that post-war world was created on.
Z początku niewiele osób wierzyło, że
At the beginning, not many people believed that we will be able to have this international fund for one memory or memorial site. But slowly and surely, some people, and I can see their faces here today, at least some of them, so they sort of warmed into that idea and joined in. I'd like to use this opportunity to thank you so much for this. This is the first site in the world that has been so taken care of, thanks to 38 countries.
od początku
There were two ideas that were leading us since the very beginning.
podwaliną czy fundamentem,
These were two ideas that laid us foundations for the fund.
pierwsze,
First,
że bezpieczeństwo jest ważniejsze.
We understood that security and safety was more important than profit, because we simply wanted to make sure that this tool can be used for many years to help preserve this place. And then the second rule is that we wanted to be completely transparent. That's why we meet with the representatives of these 38 donor states once a year. We present all the documents, we present all the audits, we assess and evaluate what has already been conserved and preserved, we communicate our priorities and so on. Over the recent 10 years, these two foundations have managed to enable a lot of trust and confidence among these 38 states. Trust and confidence that leads me hopeful about the future. That the future that we will lead to our children and the children of our children. At the beginning, we thought that the fund itself would have to be 125 million euro, so that we can have 5 million euro every year for the preservation and conservation. This was still before the crisis that struck Europe in 2009. 2 years ago, we presented to the 38 states the alternative concept. Either we increase the investment risk, or we have to increase the fund to put it up, because time will not wait for us. And the response we got from Germany was the first response we received, and I'm very grateful for this. Thank you. Because this is what we do for our common future and for our mutual future. Ladies and gentlemen,
Jestem zupełnie przekonany,
I am fully convinced
ta współpraca,
that the cooperation and this mutual trust that we build on a global scale,
fundusz będzie ukonstytuowany w pełni.
once the fund becomes fully official, once all the conservation work get into the right rhythm. So I'm fully convinced that this mutual trust and confidence and transparency will enable us to build even more, perhaps educational projects, and so the voice of this place will be better heard and will transmit to the world in a brave and courageous world. Because we are living in a world that changes so fast and is becoming more and more difficult. We do not have that many other keys to guide us than memory and reconciliation. Thank you very much.
Szanowni Państwo, proszę jeszcze o chwilę.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I can find a moment of your attention, may I now ask the Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, and Mateusz Morawiecki, the Prime Minister of Poland, to sign in the memorial book. May I ask the former inmates and the survivors to join us for a meeting with Angela Merkel and Prime Minister Morawiecki, as well as Dr. Cywiński. As for the rest of the guests, may I ask you to leave the rooms in a calm way. I'd like to thank you very much for joining us to this commemoration. Thank you so much.